Okay, babe, do you have your drink?
No.
Oh my God. Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Behind the Apron. I'm Cassie.
Yeah, I'm Manny.
And how was y'all's Valentine's Day? How was your Valentine's Day, Manny?
You ask, but we don't live together.
I know. But
we didn't do much because our little one was a little under the weather the days leading up to it, so we decided to stay in and just have a
family night.
Yeah, I was
Like
gonna
a
say, what's it, stay at home dates? I don't
like
know.
a like a Valentine's Day in or a Valentine's
We stayed
night
home.
in.
We stayed home, watched. We were rewatching The Office. So I don't know if that's what we did, but
No, I started this new season of Love is Blind. You were streaming that night. You streamed for a few
well, I forget
hours,
it
and
was
while you were
Friday. It
there,
was
yeah,
Friday, yeah. So yeah,
it
we
kind
just
of benefited the fact that like it was Friday, which is like the night that you stream um on Twitch, but it gave me Manny's like on this kick that he does not want to support any of the reality shows that I'm currently watching. Love is Blind being one of them. He thinks it's just so toxic, and I'm like, dude,
no, not toxic. I think there's no point to
you
it.
think it's toxic. You think it ruins people's lives. Is what you said.
I did not. I said it does more harm than good. That's what it does.
Could you argue the fact that working in a restaurant can sometimes be toxic and do more harm than good?
That's a job. I'm not.
Well,
I'm not out there looking for love. I'm out there making money.
Okay. Well, some people might beg to differ, but yeah.
You weren't out there looking for love. You were out there.
No, I was out there working. But yeah, so that was our Valentine's Day.
Checkmate.
Oh my God. It just so happened that I found love, but I guess that's kind of why or what today's topic is about, because it's about love in the workspace and kind of piggybacks off of what we just so briefly spoke about on last week's episode, which was finding love in the workplace. It's a very taboo subject. I feel like a lot of people don't want to talk about, especially like your management kind of mingling with employees and stuff like that. Now, I don't know if I mentioned it in last week's episode, but I've worked at 4 different corporations. So like 4 different corporate like restaurants, and each one has always been different than the other, but 3 out of the 4 have had a very like realistic boundary when it comes to fraternization and I guess dating overall. And you've worked at a little bit more restaurants and like a little bit more maybe corporations, and you worked at a mom and pop. So I feel like that's a lot different than corporate restaurant.
Yes. I mean, the mom and pop shop, they didn't care.
I think when you say it
When
like
it
that, it
came
kind of paints
to
like a negative picture. I don't think that it's that they didn't care.
I'm not. Oh, I guess yeah. The way I worded it, not that they didn't care, but they didn't. They weren't strict on it, and
Yeah,
I'm looking back on it probably because of that. Because I mean, that's
things
bound
are
to
different.
happen.
Yeah, things are different when it's like a family-run business that kind of just explodes or becomes big, because they started off with 1 location and they now have 3.
Yeah, I think so. Three. Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot can be different. You were with them when they were like in their early years, right? Or when they at least had like 1 or 2 locations. So it's different as they grow, I feel like, and as times change, because I feel like fraternization can be different or is different now than it was 10 years ago. Especially after like the whole Me Too movement. I think it's easier to catch a case.
We're gonna have to agree to disagree there, but I mean, I don't really see how the Me Too movement affects it, but I definitely do see what you mean with the whole. It can definitely lead to issues because I don't know if it's just this day and age of workers, but definitely it feels like people are just out to get other people when it comes to stuff like this. Like, they can use that to their
Well,
advantage.
that's kind of like the Me Too movement. I feel like I'm not so well versed, like, but whenever someone like a victim comes up and says, "This happened to me," a lot more victims, or a lot, like several more people have now at that point the courage to come out and say, this happened to me too. That's the Me Too movement. So if one, let's say, like, God forbid, like an upper management, crosses the line and does sexually harass someone, chances are it's not going to be like a one-time case. It's going to continue to happen. So if someone comes forward and says, this happened to me, other people in that corporation or in that establishment are going to be more empowered to say, this happened to me too.
I mean, I know what the Me Too movement is, babe. I'm just saying, I don't feel like the Me Too movement.
I guess because once you go through that manager training and you go through the training of like sexual harassment, and especially for a big corporation, that it very much so can cost a corporation a lot of money. So I was doing some research when I was talking about this subject, and back a few years ago, the CEO for McDonald's got laid off because he had a inappropriate, or I don't know, I guess it's inappropriate, quote unquote, but he had a relationship with an employee. They didn't go into specifics of the girl's like position, or like whether she was like a team member, manager, supervisor, if she worked within the corporate world of McDonald's, but they let him go. And the craziest part is that when he became CEO, he made them a lot of money. Like his time as CEO, like McDonald's benefited from it because whatever he did made them a lot of money. It just goes to show that it doesn't matter who you are, how good you are, how good you perform, because of what, like in Spanish, there's a saying that says, por una la llevan todos. So because of one person, like it's ruined for everybody else. And that's kind of like, I feel the situation in these circumstances. A lot of corporations don't want the headache, although realistically, not every single fraternization or dating relationship, although yes, technically they could all happen, chances are they not all will. That's just my perspective. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, I mean, it does, but I mean, I don't know. For me, I obviously, for those of you who, before we get into it, for those of you who don't know what fraternization is, this is a crash course, is any form of upper management mingling with your subordinates, I guess, for lack of a better word. That can go anywhere from exchanging phone numbers, hanging out outside of the workplace, following each other on social media. I think the sky is the limit with fraternization, and not to the extent they can take it out of.
No, that's technically not, although yes, that's the definition. The Google definition says, to associate or form a friendship with someone, especially when one is not supposed to. So this can go as deep as not even dating.
I mean, that's the literal word I'm talking
But
about.
exactly. So big corporations like Chili's, like Brinker, Darden, like who else? Texas Roadhouse, like McDonald's, Amazon, Google, Facebook. These corporations they're not gonna pick and choose and like what fraternization is. I feel like that's when things get sticky. When they use a word such as fraternization, they're going to go by the definition, because if they want to pick and choose what fraternization is, then that's when I think that there can be a lot of gray lines. Because think back, as a manager at Chet, I technically could not even be friends with you guys. I could not have you guys on Facebook. I could not have you guys on my social media. I could not have you guys. I could not have your phone numbers in my phone. Whereas when I was a director with Chick-fil-A, it's very much so a different culture, because you have either like a group me or a Slack, and you have your team members' phone numbers.
Isn't Slack like a Chick-fil-A, like,
No, Slack is for everybody.
I know what I'm saying. Like, isn't that what all Chick-fil-A use?
No, because when my mom was with Chick-fil-A, they used GroupMe. So these are apps that hold, I guess, kind of like...
It's a third-party app. That way you don't have to have their direct phone number.
But you do. You do have your direct phone number. It's kind of like saying, like, it's a WhatsApp.
My phone number wasn't on my Slack.
Yes, it was.
Okay, well, I mean, it's a way of indirectly, like,
Yeah, it's kind of like crowd.
that's what I said, it's a third party app.
Yes,
That way.
but that's my point is like, let's say Chick-fil-A and Darden. These are two very successful corporations, right? And one thing that we used to say before I worked for Chick-fil-A, when I was a team member, in the service industry, a server, our managers would always praise Chick-fil-A and say, man, they're busy all day long. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, they're busy. They have a drive-through line like wrapped around the parking lot. They're constantly busy and all they sell is chicken, which is truly mind-boggling versus and you would think like a restaurant like Chili's, Olive Garden, Texas Roadhouse, they have the upper hand of selling appetizers, desserts, alcohol.
Yeah, like, I mean, that being profitable and the policies, I feel like are two different things, which is why I want to focus more on the policy itself, our opinions, and how I think they affect not the profitability, but how they affect the quality of life for their employees and all parties involved. So, I mean, yeah, I get what you're saying that, like how the fact that they're that successful, yet their mindset when it comes to this subject is so different, begs the question is like, is this rule even necessary
That's
at
exactly what I'm
all?
saying.
Yeah,
That's what I was trying to say. So maybe you can
okay.
understand me.
Yes, you kind of went the long way about it, I guess.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
But yeah, like that's like, if that's what you meant, then yes. Like it's like the mentality of these two different corporations and one of them being more successful is kind of what is so weird because it's true. Like all these fast food restaurants, well, for the example we were using, like Chick-fil-A versus Cheddar's, which we've both worked at, how both of them are so profitable, but have two completely different mindsets when it comes to this one subject, which ultimately affects, like I said earlier, like affects the quality of life and the
Yeah, the quality of life.
comfortability of your day-to-day life. Because when you, like, for
But it,
people who do this for a living, you're spending majority of your day in this place.
especially as a manager,
Yes.
especially as a manager, because when I was a manager, my salary was based off of a 55-hour work week. So you're not just working an 8-hour shift 5 days a week. You're working minimum 10 because like I personally gave myself a lot to my job. I also because I loved what I did. Like I love the service industry and the food industry. So I truly gave myself, gave of myself, maybe a little too much to a fault because it came to a point where I feel like it was almost like expected of me where like, oh, it's okay. Cassie's got it. Or it's okay. Just ask Cassie. And when you're young and you're afraid to say no, it can be difficult on your like mental health because it's like, man, like I realistically know that they need me, but it's almost kind of like a manipulation tactic. Like she's not going to say no. So just ask her. And it's like, bitch, no, like I need to take care of my sanity too. But I guess going back a little bit to the fraternization, I personally feel, and this is going to be a hot take and I don't care because it needs to be said. I personally feel that this particular corporation's policy is personally set up to fail you. I feel like we've seen a lot of good managers let go or kind of forced to jump the gun and just quit because they're afraid of the label it's going to put.
The consequences of their actions.
No, okay, well, yes, no. Consequences of their actions is one. But a lot of managers I personally know would have jumped the gun and quit before they could even argue their case is because when it comes to like a no tolerance policy, now granted there are managers who are outright like wronged in a situation and they deserve to be fired, but there are several other people that we've seen lose their position. I personally think it's dumb because if we were to walk into each,
If we were to like launch like an underground investigation and really try to find out if people are doing this, like,
yeah, I could go into each one of these concepts across the entire United States And at least one manager, past or present, would have at least one team member's phone number in their phone, because that's also an unrealistic rule. It's like
100%.
like you're not only dictating, and I understand, like, you represent the company wherever you go. So you're not going to go out and act a fool and misrepresent the company that you work for, because at the end of the day, like, this is your career. I totally understand that perspective and I respect it. Trust me, I do. But when you start to go and dictate on what I can and cannot do outside of my work, as far as like who I can and cannot have on my Facebook, whether or not it's like in a complete innocent manner. Like when I worked at Chick-fil-A, I had my team members on Facebook. That doesn't mean I'm in a relationship with every single one of them, but they almost tell you who you can and can't be friends with. If you were a high school student or in college and somebody were to tell you who you can and cannot be friends with, a normal sane person would come up to you and be like, yo, that's dumb. That's a red flag. Walk away. But you're going to let a company tell you who you can and can't be friends with? Friends. It's not even like, and I get it to a certain extent, but once there's like a no tolerance policy, it's where it kind of like gets me.
Yeah, I mean, I can't relate. I was never a manager, but I can definitely, like, I understand where you're coming from, because yeah, it's very frustrating for
Realistic.
someone to, like, not even in a work setting. Like, if someone, just in general, like, if someone comes up to you and tells you, yeah, you can't do this, like, your human first instinct, it's just to be like, why?
Yeah.
Like, why? Like, what's wrong with what I'm trying to do?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, again, not that I can't relate because I was never a manager, but it's like 95% of the time, the restaurant will, actually, no, I'm wrong. I may have this mixed up. You might have to correct me. But 95% of the time, the restaurant will fire or let go of the manager.
Yeah.
And not the TS. So yeah. So it's like, in that sense, that's even more dumb, because it's like, no offense, as messed up as it's gonna sound, your manager is more valuable than whatever team member they got involved.
It's a lot
with.
easier to replace a team member than it is to replace a manager.
Which is because we both personally know of people who have lost their jobs for this, and it's like, we knew, like, these people were like really good managers. Like, they were people that, like, myself included.
Please.
Sorry, we're in a movie theater. I gotta silence my phone. We personally knew, like, managers that, like, I personally, like, if I needed something done, I was like, hey, I can go, I know that this person's gonna get it done. And this person ended up, like, losing their job because of this. And it's like, damn, for someone.
Always the good managers too.
Yeah, unfortunately. And it's like, when you look back on it, it's like, this really happened over, and for example, I don't know what position this person had, but this happened, like, oh my God, like, over a host. Like, anyone with a heartbeat. Well, no, wrong. Not anyone, but being a host is one of the very simple jobs at a restaurant.
But I agree that it's actually a very important job, because you don't want to have like a cara de perra and like greet you at the front door.
Oh, absolutely. But I'm just saying, like, as an example, like, that's just a job that's like easily, like, you see people come in and out of that job so often.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's a definite, we can both agree on that this is a dumb old rule that needs to go away.
And
be reformed.
You have to evolve with the times. And I feel like some people, we have the perspective because we come from a specific, or from several different backgrounds of corporations in the food service industry. So I personally can't tell you the corporate side of Red Lobster or Outback Steakhouse or like Dunkin', Starbucks, like those. I feel like there can be realistic
measures and guidelines.
Yeah, and as times evolve and change, you can't have the same policies that you had in the 60s and 70s or 80s or even 90s that you want to implement to this day. Like, it's just not realistic, and that is my biggest thing.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, when you think about it, when there's like a rule like that in place, they're almost expecting you to be like a robot. Like you just come to work, do your job, and that's it.
It's almost, no, I feel like it's almost like they're waiting for you to like fuck up.
That's a bit grim, but if you
But
want to look at it that way.
I guess. So I went ahead and did a little Google research for this topic in particular because I wanted to kind of branch out of just the food service industry. I also wanted to ask this question and I wanted to know like what the policies were for companies, big companies, corporate companies across America that were not the food service industry. So like,
Dramatic pause.
no, I'm going to cut this out. So I Googled this and it says as many as 90% of women in the restaurant industry have experienced sexual harassment. I have been one of those women. I'm not going to go into it because it's not something I wish to. And the thing is that it wasn't even from another manager. It was from another team member years ago. And I think that the craziest part is that women nowadays have their mind so morphed. They probably don't even know that they're being sexually harassed because of how much people sexualize women nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I want to know, like, let us know in the comments because I want to know if a strict fraternization policy or a rule is a deal breaker or no big deal for you when it comes to working in a restaurant or working in a job, in any job. Yeah. So Google strongly discourages dating colleagues that you manage or report to like directly. I didn't want to go into too deep of a dive because it's not like a research paper, but that's Google's policy. So I guess they're saying like if there's a different department head and you're in another department, like maybe HR and sales or HR and
kind of like working at different restaurants for us in the food service industry.
yeah. Okay, so that was Google. Facebook, they train and allow you to ask once. So you can ask your coworker once and you're never allowed to ask them again. I guess it's kind of like saying, like, let's say we're coworkers at Facebook and I want to just ask you out for a drink or like to hang out. They train and allow you to ask once and you never ask again. And I'm busy or I can't that night is considered a no. That's wild. Because what if you are busy or you have like families in town and like you seriously can't?
I mean, my follow-up question to that will be like, how strict, like how on top of it are they? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, like, are they monitoring the cameras? Like, no, you asked her at Thursday, January 1st at 12:51. That's it. You're done. Back it up.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it can benefit. I see why that's a good idea because there could be some real creeps or some potential stalker situations.
I'm sorry, I gotta go draw. I just thought of a funny moment, like a funny scenario. Like they have a list outside of their cubicle. Who has asked you out? You have to sign your name, date, and time.
So that's Facebook. Amazon. There's no strict policy. In fact, there are many marriages within the company. Unless there's a conflict of interest, managers must disclose their relationships with direct employees. I guess since Amazon is pretty huge, I think of it almost like Chick-fil-A. Like a lot of the times you'll see like
the leaders dating each other.
Apart from that, Chick-fil-A will be run by the owner operator, right? And their wife is part of like the team.
I remember you told me that, yeah.
I think it's very beautiful, but I think it's actually very beautiful because you want to have something, I guess because it's different because it's a franchise, but still like Chick-fil-A is just a whole other monster that's so different to several other fast food chains or corporations or food service industry restaurants, be it dine-in or fast food. They're very unique in the way that they think and that they run. And it's actually very beautiful. A lot of people don't see that because a lot of people don't work at Chick-fil-A, but I think it's very beautiful. And they have probably one of my favorite policies or structures when it comes to not the environment, but the culture as far as team members to leaders, to directors, to owner operators, because at that point you truly do become like a huge family.
I was only there for a few months, so I can't relate.
And you were actually just a team member position, but we were dating and I was a director. I just realized that. I was an assistant director at the time. No. I was a director already.
Yeah.
It was after I had Eddie. I had come back from leave. Then you started there for a few months, and we never worked the same time, mainly because of Eddie. But yeah, I just realized that I hadn't thought about that when I was like putting down that in my notes.
I feel like a lot of people didn't know though. I don't know. I didn't tell. It wasn't my topic of conversation.
Yeah, and you didn't really you worked there part-time. That is wild that, yeah, we were dating, basically common law marriage, and you were an employee there and I was a director. But you see, and that's my point. Like, it works. It's not, there was no favoritism because I never worked the same shift as you, hardly ever. It was very rare. I think I can literally count them on one hand. I think where they overlapped. The one I can only think of was maybe one Christmas, like one that happened over Christmas that we worked together. When you have like the wherewithal to like compose yourself and act professionally at a job that you truly love and love doing, I think that it's very doable and very manageable. And I think that Chick-fil-A giving you that opportunity to prove yourself does a lot more good than a corporation like where they kind of like chokehold you and tell you, no, you can't do that. The human instinct, I feel is gonna be like, well, let me test the limits and let me see how far I can go.
I don't even think, I mean, yes, I do agree with you that some people do have that mentality, but I feel like, kind of like going back to how you were saying, like, you are kind of being set up to fail because, I mean, it's like, as humans, like, we're gonna connect. Like, you're gonna meet people that you vibe with, people who have the same interests as you, and whether it be a romantic relationship or not, like, a friendship is
even
going
like
to be formed.
Even a friendly relationship.
Like for people who, because we've both known people who have worked at restaurants for like years. Like, I'm talking about like longer than people have been alive sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it's like, how do you expect someone to show up to a job to make it an example, because I don't know how long they've worked there. Like, you expect someone to show up to a job for 10 years in a row, and you expect them to not have made any friends, any connections, to not like have met anyone at that job. Like, let's be realistic.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah, and I think that's what it boils down to, is it being realistic.
Now, here's what I want to do. And because, you know, I like to play devil's advocate. I want, like, what I'm trying to say is, like, when I think of, like, the pros and cons, I mean, it wouldn't even be fair because there's just more cons than pros. Because at the end of the day, in my opinion, what this all boils down to is how professional can people be.
Exactly.
And to play devil's advocate, like, I understand, like, corporations like why they do this is because, for me, in my opinion, what it boils down to is, like, you know, they have trust issues. They don't trust people to be professional.
Yeah.
And that's a fair point.
Fair.
That's absolutely a fair point. But, like, my proposition to revise the rule, you can give your own after me. I feel like the rule should be that you should be allowed to, one, form friendships with your coworkers. At the end of the day, to just give a brief and simple example. Someone calls out. If you don't have people's phone number, who's going to fill up that position? You're going to call them through crowd who no one even looks at?
No, and I think the craziest part is that, like, after COVID, when we were struggling to get team members to come back into the restaurant because a lot of them were still living off of their unemployment check, it's like a lot of the times managers are working positions. And so let's say I'm working sets 1, or I'm working the grill, or I'm working the fry. I have another manager out there helping me run the floor at the host stand or dealing with the guest. I have somebody call out, and I cannot I cannot leave my position on fry or on sets 1 to go to the computer, look for this person's phone number, dial it on the office phone, and then pray to God that they answer me. It's like, no, they're going to think that it could be someone else, another manager that one, they probably don't like and don't want to do a favor for. But if they were to come from me, someone that they're vibing with or someone that they're cool with, and for me to be like, yo, XYZ, I need you tonight. Can you not? Yes, no, okay, bye. Or I can send a mass text out. A lot of people are going to want to see, or a lot of people will answer a lot faster through a group chat text versus a crowd group message, which is a third party app like Slack.
In that time that I was there, I messaged in crowd a grand total of like 5 times.
Yeah.
And it was to find
that you initiated.
Yes, that I initiated. Like, there'd be times like when our GM will make an announcement and like he needs people to reply, obviously, but like me going into the app to genuinely like ask a question or message someone, that's the point we're making. It's unrealistic. I personally, when I first got hired,
inconvenient.
Yes, when I first got hired, no one ever told me about this rule.
But it's inconvenient to have to go through an app, which is, and you've had crowd and you've had Slack.
Like another example I could use, I'm currently working like at Chipotle, and I work the prep shift, which is from 6 a.m. till 10. Could you imagine, do you realize how, if someone calls out, who is going to pick up the phone? First off, from your job. And second off, at 6:30 in the morning.
Yeah. Much less respond to a message thread.
You know what I'm saying? So imagine if if they didn't have our phone numbers and they had to go through that in those situations. The point we're trying to make is, honestly, not only is it unrealistic, but as like you said, it can get to a point, like if it's an emergency, not being able to have your employees' phone numbers can be a huge inconvenience. Like imagine a Friday night, 2 servers call out. That can make or break a shift.
Yeah.
So it's like, imagine if you can't contact someone on the fly because you don't have their phone number. Mm-hmm.
But let me finish with, I think we kind of went on a tangent after we were going through. No, I just have a few more. So that was Amazon, the one that they didn't have like a strict policy. The next big one is Apple. So Apple prohibits employees from having relationships with direct supervisors. So the people that you directly report to. What I find so interesting is that all these policies that we've gone over today are all based on dating. But if we look back at the definition of fraternization, it goes as simple as saying that you shouldn't have or be friends with people that you're not supposed to. And I think that's kind of where I start to question and draw the line and say, okay, no, this is kind of like bogus. At the end of the day, you're going to have team members that you click with and team members that you don't click with. Does that mean you're going to disrespect one over the other? Absolutely not. But the same way corporate tells us to have your aces in places on big holidays or big days in the food industry where you're going to be the busiest. Like, for example, Valentine's Day, graduation season is a huge one. Holidays like the week of Thanksgiving, the week of Christmas, especially in a place like Orlando where, people visit that place. It's a tourist place, 365. There's always going to be places or people at Disney. There's always going to be tourists all year round. Like, at some points, you're just going to have to play favoritism. You're going to have to. But corporate can't hide it behind the excuse of, oh, it's called putting your aces in place. And no, don't tell me you want me to put my aces in place and then say it's not favoritism.
I understand where you're coming from, and it does. I mean, it's absolutely true.
It's dog shit. It's horse shit. Like Todd used to say.
Now, when you bring up that point, it kind of it is very hypocritical because when you say because I want to expand on this because I don't want people to take it the wrong way. When you say people, when you say, oh, you're going to click with certain people or vibe with certain people, I'm not even thinking, when you say that, people are probably going to think, oh, they're friends. I'm like, no, I'm thinking of it in a work aspect to it.
I can count on you.
Because at the end of the day, people's work ethics are not the same. You're going to have people who like to work and people who don't like to work.
If I wanted to be a bitch, I could schedule all of the people that I'm friends with on my shift. But I'm not going to do that. You have to you obviously, like, the goal is to have a smooth shift throughout the entire day. So now I just got real hot because it took me back to a moment, but like, it's just so fucking ridiculous.
Let's give you a moment to cool off.
So going back, or piggybacking off a little bit what I was talking about earlier when it came to how successful companies can be when it comes to sales and how they run like their restaurants as far as like policies go. So the wealthiest fast food places in America, obviously number 1 is McDonald's. Number 2 is Starbucks. Probably should have like checked their policy because obviously it's one of the most like popular places. Maybe I can get that for next week. But number 3 is where we have Chick-fil-A come in. So they're the top 3. In the top 3, they're ranked number 3. I think this was for 2023 when it comes to wealthiest restaurants in America. Sit down restaurants, dine in, was Olive Garden coming in at a 5.1 billion in 2023 for sales. Texas Roadhouse coming in at number 2, Applebee's 3, Chili's in 4th place, and Buffalo Wild Wings in 5th place, all within the $4 billion sales range. But the craziest thing is that obviously Olive Garden is part of Darden, which is what Cheddar's was under. Texas Roadhouse, I worked there, which is number 2, and I worked there in 2023, and they were the second, like, financially
the most profitable.
Applebee's at number 3 and Chili's at number 4. Working at Chili's was a bitch. It was. I had to literally fight for my life when I was working there, but I made really good money, and it's a staple for America. I mean, just look at the show The Office. There's several episodes where they kind of nod at Chili's, or it's in the Chili's setting. So I think that Chili's is a staple for America, which is why it's at number 4. I guess Applebee's too, but Applebee's is not it's not what it used to be. It truly isn't. People go there for the Dollaritas.
That's disgusting.
Very much so. But Texas Roadhouse, they are monsters. I didn't like working at Texas Roadhouse. Their restaurant is a powerhouse. It truly is insane. Like, they know what they're doing. Working at Texas Roadhouse, I worked there for a few months. It kind of like was very interesting to see it kind of work out. They have so many moving parts to that restaurant. It was very fun working there. I loved working there too. I loved working at all the restaurants I worked at, just some more than others. It's just, they each have their pros and cons, but like I said, 3 out of the 4 had realistic, like, fraternization policies, and yet all 4 are within the wealthiest corporations in
the top
America.
5 wealthiest.
Yeah, literally. Chick-fil-A is number 3, and they're the ones that have had probably like the least micromanaged when it comes to that. And yet there's probably more Chick-fil-A's than there are
some of these big chain restaurants.
Yeah, so I don't know, it's kind of wild. It's very wild when you think about it, and you think like, man, all they sell is chicken. But it just goes to show that I think that it's very doable. And I think that's my point when I'm saying, like, when I'm giving these statistics, because they prove that they can run a very financially successful corporation and have very realistic goals. Same as Texas Roadhouse and Chili's. Like, I think that
it goes to show that, like, I don't want to be rude and blunt, but it really is an outdated policy. Like, because you're just limiting, like, what your business could do. Because, like, your employees will be a lot, like, not what your business can do. You're limiting the enjoyment, like, you're already at work, like, you're already doing a job, you're doing at work, putting more stress, limitations and stress on, like, what you're doing there, because like I said earlier, like when you're working these jobs full time, like you're in this place for 80 to 90% of your week. And it's like, if this is the one place that you're at the most, to have no friends essentially is, especially like if you're a manager, because I'm talking from a manager's perspective, because like when you're a manager,
Yeah.
you're at a restaurant, you're at that job for, again, 95% of your weekend. It's like you're basically telling them like you can only have this small group of friends, which is other managers. And 95% of the times, a lot of managers don't get along. You're lucky if you get along with the other managers, because
Outside of work. Because one thing is getting along within the restaurant, but getting along outside of work,
yeah,
I think could be the barrier.
that is definitely true. So it's like, that just goes to show that rules like that are not necessary, and
They're necessary, but there has to be reasonable, realistic boundaries. I feel like, right?
I mean, but like at the end of the day, like I'm not saying people need to sign a contract, like, you know, saying certain stuff, but like at the end of the day, if there's a clear guideline and expectations of like professionalism and like what's expected of you, I don't think the policy is needed to begin with. You know what I'm saying? Like, as long as you know, like, hey, if you like someone, that's great, that's fantastic. Do whatever you want outside of the workplace. But when you're inside of this building, you need to accept your role and they need to accept theirs. And there needs to be no overlapping because of what goes on outside.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's, again, to defend them, I understand that everyone can do that. But when you're getting into these kind of roles, you know, you got to you got to play the cards you're dealt. And those were the cards that you're dealt when you're a manager.
One of the craziest things I just realized is that Chick-fil-A is number 3, and they're closed one day a week compared to all these other restaurants. McDonald's is open 7 days a week, so is Starbucks. Everyone is open 7 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
Chick-fil-A ranks at number 3 in the wealthiest restaurants of America for 2023, and they were open apart from like
Holidays.
No, and that's the craziest part. They don't have Mother's Day and Father's Day to account for, because those fall on Sundays. So the biggest days in a restaurant's calendar year, Chick-fil-A does not even have those sales to reflect on, which is even crazier.
When you put it that way, it actually is pretty crazy.
Yeah. So as we head into our post shift, is there anything that you saw online that kind of like caught your attention as far as like it being related to the food industry?
Honestly,
no Karens that we have to out.
Honestly, no. I only have social media for the memes. I don't really
Oh my God.
see any news or
I have
keep track of it.
Something that kind of really upset me. I saw it on Threads, and I actually shared it on our Threads account for the podcast. And thanks to your daily dose of cringe on Threads, they shared a picture of a receipt, and they obviously like scratched everything out, and they captioned it "thoughts." So this person ordered 2 Chardonnay glasses priced at $12 each. She scratched out the tip amount. The subtotal was $24. Tax was $168. The total before the tip was $25.68. She left no tip. And in the grand total, she said, "I'm a military spouse. It should be free. Next time, thank a military spouse." And she put a little smiley face. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that she's stupid, and hopefully people know who she is and they also make fun of her whenever they see her. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life.
The craziest part is not even that she had the audacity to like ask for a comp or ask for it to be free. She didn't even ask for a discount. She said that she like went as far as saying this should be free. Bitch, to begin with, you ordered 2 glasses of wine. All restaurants will not discount alcohol, much less cover it. That is completely wild to me. And I think that's a very slap in the face. Like, I get it and I understand, like, it's a very difficult position to be a military spouse. Like, I have family members that are in the military. But at that point, it's kind of like embarrassing. If my if I was in the military and my spouse acted out like that, I would be pissed. You're representing me. Like, and then you're going to throw a little tantrum like that? Absolutely not. I would be chewing your ass out when you got home.
Yeah, some people just have no self-awareness when it comes to things like that, and that's unfortunate. And these are the people you run into when you work at the restaurant industry, unfortunately.
And plus, how am I supposed to know you're a military spouse? You're not walking around with an ID or like identification that says I'm a military spouse. Do you get an ID that says I'm a military spouse? No. So how am I supposed to know? I'm just supposed to like take that information out of my ass? That really like grinded my gears. So we are at the end of our episode and we just kind of want to, I think it was a very productive episode. I think that we got a lot off our chest. At least I did. And I hope that it kind of gives you guys a little insight on one of the many things that service industry people have to deal with.
We're trying to, again, this podcast is for the people who never have and never will have a restaurant job, so you can live a day in our lives.
But I also want it to be a community where, like, like the restaurant people who work in the restaurant world, for them to come out here and feel free to bitch in our comments about stuff that's happened to them. Like, we want to build a community of people for
Underappreciated,
overlooked and underappreciated group of people that I've personally been a part of. That's what we're hoping to do with this podcast. I think that does it. We had a very good shift today, babe. What do you think?
Well, I mean, it definitely was fun and a subject that we have firsthand experience with, so it was fun to talk about and bring people into a day in a life, or not a day in a life, the life of people who have to work under these conditions. Just gonna send you off with a good luck message that if you work tonight, I hope you make a lot of money, and I see that my son agrees with that, so
yeah,
have a good night.
Yeah. And on that note, make sure you guys are following all our social media pages. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this episode with a friend. Most importantly, don't forget to clock out.
See you next week, foodies.